The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the alien ship called Crimson Dawn. Commander Vextal stood watching the blue and green planet below him turn slowly in space. Earth looked so small and quiet from up here. The commander's reptile-like skin gleamed under the ship's lights as he studied the world that would soon belong to his empire. The Zephyrian Empire had taken over 17 different star systems without firing a single shot. Their way of doing things was simple, and it always worked. First, they would break the enemy's military equipment and stop their governments from talking to each other. Then the people would get scared and give up within a few hours. Fear was the best weapon the Zephyrians had. Vextal looked at the reports. His scouts had brought back about Earth. The humans who lived there had only just learned how to travel between stars. They had weak technology and small armies. This would be the easiest planet they had ever conquered. The commander's yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction as he thought about how quickly this would all be over. "Start the first attack," Vextal told his crew. "Break their military satellites and stop their communication systems." The attack began immediately. Invisible energy beams shot down from the alien ships and hit every military base on Earth. The Pentagon went dark in seconds. NORAD lost all power. Navy command centers found themselves cut off from their ships and submarines. In space above Earth, the USS Liberty was hit by a pulse of energy that left Captain Jake Morrison and his crew floating helplessly with no power. On Earth, chaos started right away. Television screens went black everywhere. The internet stopped working. Cell phones became useless pieces of plastic. Radio stations fell silent one by one. In homes across America, families gathered around battery-powered radios trying to understand what was happening. The emergency broadcasts that still worked painted a scary picture. Earth was under attack by aliens from another world. In the small town of Cedar Falls in Ohio, a man named Danny Walsh stood in his garage staring at his dead television. Danny had been a Marine sergeant before he retired. Now he worked at the local hardware store and spent weekends hunting with his friends. His wife Lisa came out of the kitchen with their 2 young children holding on to her dress. "Danny, what's happening?" Lisa asked. Her voice shook with fear. Danny looked at his family and then at the hunting rifles hanging on his garage wall. His jaw got tight and his hands made fists. "I don't know yet, honey. But whatever it is, we're going to be ready for it." All across America, similar scenes were happening. In small towns and big cities, people were realizing that something terrible was going on. The government couldn't help them. The military was cut off. The police had no way to talk to each other. But Americans had something the aliens didn't know about. They had guns in their homes, and they knew how to use them. The Zephyrians watched from their ships as the human military systems went offline. Everything was going exactly as planned. Commander Vextal smiled, showing his sharp teeth. In a few hours, the humans would realize they had no choice but to surrender. Then the real work of taking over the planet could begin. But the aliens had made a big mistake. They thought that breaking the human military would leave Earth defenseless. They had studied human governments and human armies, but they had never learned about human civilians. They didn't know that in America, almost every family owned weapons. They didn't understand that humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years and had learned to survive when their leaders failed them. In Cedar Falls, Danny Walsh was already thinking like a soldier again. He knew his neighbors, and he knew they wouldn't just sit around waiting to be conquered. Pete Jackson, who owned the gun store, would have weapons and ammunition. Mary Rodriguez had been police chief for 20 years before she retired. Bill Harrison had served in Vietnam and still remembered how to fight. The aliens thought they had won the war before it even started. They believed that humans would panic and give up when they saw how powerful the Zephyrian Empire was. But they were about to learn something that would shock them to their core. Americans didn't just have an army. Every American was the army. Every town was a fortress. Every family was a fighting unit. As night fell over Earth, the aliens prepared for victory. But in garages and basements and hunting cabins across the country, humans were preparing for war. The Zephyrians had woken up something they didn't understand. They had attacked a planet full of apex predators who had spent their whole history learning how to kill things that wanted to kill them. The real fight was about to begin, and the aliens had no idea what they had gotten themselves into. The alien message came at dawn when most people were just waking up. Commander Vextal's ugly reptile face appeared on every working screen across the planet. His voice came through translation machines that made his words sound cold and emotionless, in perfect English. "People of Earth," the alien commander said, "your military has been destroyed. Your governments cannot help you. Give up now and join the Zephyrian Empire, and we will let you live. Fight us, and we will kill every human on this planet." In Cedar Falls, Danny Walsh had not slept all night. He had spent the dark hours going from house to house talking to his neighbors. What started as just a few worried people in his garage had grown into something much bigger. By morning, over 200 people had gathered in the high school gym. Pete Jackson had brought every gun and box of bullets from his store. Mary Rodriguez was using ham radios to talk to other towns because somehow those old radios still worked, when nothing else did. Danny stood up in front of all the people, and his voice carried the authority he had learned in the Marines. "Listen to me, everyone. These aliens think they've won because they broke our army. They don't understand that in America, every citizen is the army. We're not going to roll over and let them take our homes." Across the country, the same thing was happening everywhere. In the mountains of Montana, a rancher named Bill Harrison was gathering all the hunters and cowboys he knew. These were men who could shoot a deer from 500 yards away and who knew every trail and hiding spot in 50 square miles of wilderness. In Detroit, a woman named Janet Miller, who had worked in car factories for 30 years, was showing people how to build weapons from spare parts. In Texas, a high school football coach named Steve Baker was organizing his players and their parents to defend their small town. The Zephyrians were watching all this from their ships above Earth. Their scientist, Dr. Kethra, came to the command, Bridge with a worried expression on her face. She had been studying the human communications they could intercept. "Commander," she said, "the humans are not acting like we expected. Instead of being afraid and hiding, they seem to be getting organized. They're not surrendering." Commander Vextal waved one of his clawed hands dismissively. "That's impossible. These primitives have no military leaders left. Their governments can't give them orders. They'll fall apart within a few days when they realize how hopeless their situation is." But the commander was wrong. On every continent, humans were doing exactly the opposite of what the aliens expected. They weren't falling apart. They were coming together. The ham radio networks that connected small towns were spreading information faster than the aliens could track. People who had never met each other were coordinating their plans across thousands of miles. In Cedar Falls, Danny Walsh was becoming the leader of something that looked more like a real army every hour. Susan Carter, who worked as an engineer at the local power plant, had figured out how to jam alien communication signals using modified radio equipment. Dr. Paul Henderson, who was the town veterinarian, was setting up a medical station to treat wounded fighters. He had spent years operating on animals and knew he could do the same for people if he had to. The aliens had expected to fight an army with generals and colonels giving orders from headquarters. Instead, they were about to face millions of independent groups that could think and adapt and change their plans faster than any traditional military force. Each group knew their local area better than any outsider ever could. They knew which roads to block and which buildings provided the best cover and where to hide supplies. The Zephyrians had studied human governments and human armies, but they had never understood human civilians. They didn't know that American. Children learned to shoot before they learned to drive. They didn't know that American families had been preparing for disasters and invasions for generations. They didn't know that in American culture being ready to fight for your home and family was considered normal and necessary. In small towns across America, the same pattern was repeating. Local leaders were emerging naturally. People with military experience were teaching others basic tactics. Hunters were sharing their knowledge about camouflage and tracking. Mechanics were modifying vehicles for combat. Farmers were turning their equipment into weapons. Everyone was contributing whatever skills they had to the common defense. The Zephyrians kept waiting for the humans to realize they couldn't win and surrender. But surrender was not something Americans understood when their homes were threatened. These were the descendants of people who had fought a revolution against the most powerful empire on Earth, using hunting rifles and farming tools. They were the children of settlers who had survived in a wilderness full of dangerous animals and hostile weather. They came from families that had fought civil wars and world wars and had never given up no matter how bad things got. As the second day of the invasion began, the aliens were starting to realize they might have made a serious mistake. The humans weren't behaving like any species the Zephyrian Empire had ever conquered. Instead of cowering in fear, they were sharpening their weapons and digging in for a long fight. The sleeping giant was beginning to stir, and when it fully woke up, the aliens were going to learn why humans had conquered an entire planet before they ever left it. The first alien landing ships came down in the biggest cities around the world. Commander Vextal had planned this carefully. He would take control of the major population centers, and the rest of the humans would have to surrender. The plan had worked perfectly on 17 other worlds. It should have been simple, but Earth was different in ways the aliens couldn't understand. In downtown Chicago, Captain Lisa Grant of the Illinois National Guard had lost contact with her headquarters when the aliens attacked. But instead of running away, she had gathered every police officer, firefighter, and armed citizen she could find. When the sleek Zephyrian ships landed in Grant Park, they found themselves facing not terrified civilians, but a coordinated defense force that had been preparing for this moment. The aliens had better weapons than the humans. Their energy rifles could punch through concrete, and their armor could stop most bullets. But they had never fought an enemy that used the city itself as a weapon. Tony Rivera was a firefighter who knew every tunnel and sewer pipe under Chicago. He led teams of fighters through the underground passages, emerging behind alien positions where they least expected trouble. Rachel Martinez was a police sniper who had spent 10 years practicing her shooting from the tops of tall buildings. She picked off alien soldiers from skyscrapers while they tried to figure out where the shots were coming from. Carlos Mendez operated heavy construction equipment and used bulldozers and cranes to create barriers that trapped alien vehicles in narrow streets where they couldn't maneuver. The Zephyrian ground commander, Captain Zorthak, found his forces, pinned down in what should have been a simple occupation. These humans fought with a creativity that made no sense according to everything the aliens knew about warfare. They turned every building into a fortress, and every street into a trap. "They're using their own city against us," Zorthak reported back to the mothership. "Every civilian seems to know how to fight. They appear from nowhere and disappear before we can respond." The situation was even worse in rural areas. The aliens had sent reconnaissance teams to scout the countryside, thinking it would be empty and harmless. Instead, they ran into hunting parties led by people like Ben Morgan, an Alaska guide who knew how to track animals through terrain that would kill most people. Ben and hunters like him struck at alien patrols and vanished into forests and mountains they had known since childhood. The Zephyrians had sensors that could detect movement from miles away, but they were useless against humans who understood how to move without being seen. These people had spent their lives hunting deer and elk and bears. Hiding from aliens with fancy equipment was just another kind of hunting. Back in Cedar Falls, Danny Walsh's group had grown into something that looked like a real military unit. They had 200 fighters now, and more people joining every day. Susan Carter had not only figured out how to jam alien communications, but had started building devices that could overload their equipment. Dr. Paul Henderson was treating wounded resistance fighters with the same calm skill he used on injured animals. The aliens had expected to face armies with clear command structures that could be defeated by killing the generals. Instead, they found themselves fighting millions of small groups that seemed to coordinate perfectly, even though they had no central leadership. It was like fighting a swarm of angry bees that got more organized the more you tried to destroy them. Danny. Walsh understood what was happening even if the aliens didn't. Americans had always been suspicious of big government and centralized authority. They preferred to handle problems locally with people they knew and trusted. This made them incredibly difficult to defeat because there was no single leader to capture and no central command to destroy. Every town had people like Danny who had military training. Every community had police officers and firefighters who knew how to work under pressure. Every family had hunters who could shoot accurately and farmers who understood logistics and mechanics who could fix or build anything they needed. When you put all these skills together and gave people a reason to fight for their homes, you got something more dangerous than any traditional army. The Zephyrians kept sending reports back to their mothership that made no sense to Commander Vexatal. How could primitives with crude weapons be causing so much trouble for the most advanced military force in the galaxy? But the reports kept coming in. Alien patrols ambushed and wiped out. Supply convoys destroyed by improvised explosives. Communication. Arrays sabotaged by teenagers who treated it like a video game. Dr. Kethra was studying all the data and beginning to understand something that terrified her. These humans weren't fighting like any species the Zephyrian Empire had ever encountered. They adapted their tactics faster than the aliens could respond. They learned from every engagement and shared that knowledge across their entire population, within hours. They seemed to treat warfare as both a science and an art form. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to be enjoying themselves. Intercepted human communications revealed fighters joking and laughing even in the middle of combat. They called the aliens names and made fun of their weapons and tactics. This wasn't the behavior of a defeated population. This was the behavior of predators who had found worthy prey. The invasion was only 3 days old, but already Commander Vextal was beginning to suspect that his empire had made a terrible mistake. These humans weren't just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something else entirely, something dangerous that should have been left alone. But it was too late to turn back now. The Zephyrian Empire was committed to this fight, and they were going to learn exactly what they had awakened. 2 weeks after the invasion began, Commander Vextal stood in his command center staring at reports that made no sense. His empire had conquered 17 star systems using the same tactics that were failing completely on Earth. The humans should have surrendered by now. Instead, they seemed to be getting stronger and more organized every day. Major Krendos approached the commander with the latest casualty reports. His face showed the fear that was spreading through the entire alien fleet. "Sir, we're losing ground in every area. The humans aren't fighting like any species we've ever faced. They have no unified command, but somehow they coordinate perfectly. They adapt to our tactics faster than we can change them." Dr. Kethra had been studying human behavior and evolution for 2 weeks straight. What she had discovered made her sick with worry. She requested an emergency meeting with the command staff and brought holographic displays that showed the terrible truth about what they were fighting. "Commander," she began with a shaking voice, "we have made a catastrophic error in understanding these creatures. Humans aren't just another intelligent species. They are apex predators who have spent millions of years evolving to kill other apex predators." The display showed the history of human evolution. Early humans hunting massive elephants called mammoths with nothing but spears and teamwork. Ancient civilizations that built their entire cultures around warfare. Global conflicts that involved hundreds of millions of fighters and weapons that could destroy entire cities. Every war in their history has made them better killers, Dr. Kethra continued. They have turned everything from rocks to the splitting of atoms into weapons. But, most importantly, they have never fought as a unified species before. We have given them their first common enemy and united them for the first time in their existence. On Earth, this unity was becoming more obvious every day. The ham radio networks that had started as local emergency communications had evolved into a sophisticated system that connected resistance fighters across the entire planet. Helen Park had been an engineer for NASA before she retired. Now she was working with Kevin Young, who understood telecommunications better than most aliens, to create communication channels that the Zephyrians couldn't break or intercept. A retired philosophy professor named Dr. Alan Brooks had developed something even more dangerous than new weapons. He had created a way of thinking about warfare that was being taught to millions of fighters who had never met him. His ideas spread through the resistance networks like wildfire. "The aliens think like a hive mind," Brooks explained during a radio broadcast that reached 6 continents. "They can't understand that our strength comes from our differences. Every human thinks differently and fights differently. That makes us completely unpredictable." This was proving true in ways that terrified the Zephyrians. In Los Angeles, a gang leader named Marcus Johnson was working with a suburban mother named Jennifer White to coordinate attacks on alien positions. Their completely different backgrounds created tactics that alien computers couldn't model or predict. What looked like chaos to the aliens was actually a new form of warfare that used human diversity as a weapon. The Zephyrians had been trained to fight enemies that followed logical patterns. Their own military was based on rigid hierarchies where every soldier knew exactly what to do in every situation, but humans seemed to make up new rules in the middle of every battle. They would retreat when they should attack and attack when they should retreat. They would offer to surrender and then explode their own positions when the aliens came to accept the surrender. Danny Walsh had become something like a general without ever being appointed by anyone. People just started following his lead because he knew what he was doing and cared about keeping them alive. His forces in Cedar Falls had grown to over 1,000 fighters, and they were coordinating with similar groups across Ohio and beyond. Susan Carter had not only learned to jam alien communications, but had started building weapons that could overload Zephyrian equipment from a distance. She worked with Maria Santos, who understood electronics, and Alex Chen, who could write computer programs that confused alien targeting systems. Together, they were creating technology that was in some ways more advanced than what the aliens had brought to Earth. The most disturbing reports came from captured alien prisoners. Humans had started taking Zephyrian soldiers alive and interrogating them. What they learned was that the alien empire was not nearly as strong as it appeared. The Zephyrians were bureaucrats and administrators who relied on overwhelming technological superiority to win quick victories. They had never faced an enemy that could adapt and improve faster than they could respond. Kelly Roberts had been an Air Force maintenance chief before the invasion. Now she was leading a team of civilian engineers who were reverse engineering captured alien technology in a hidden laboratory beneath a shopping mall in Phoenix. Within days, they had figured out how alien communication devices worked, and were building human versions that were actually better than the originals. "They're not warriors," Kelly reported during a nationwide briefing that reached resistance cells across the planet. "They're clerks with fancy weapons. Their entire military doctrine is based on following procedures and protocols. When their playbook fails, they literally don't know what to do." This discovery changed everything. Human forces began developing tactics specifically designed to exploit Zephyrian weaknesses. Diane Foster, who operated farm equipment, led teams that used agricultural machinery to create massive dust clouds that blinded alien sensors. Luis Rodriguez, who had been a Marine, developed urban warfare techniques that deliberately triggered alien panic responses. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and it was hungry for alien blood. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of attacking a planet full of creatures who had evolved to be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Humans had spent their entire history learning to kill things that wanted to kill them. Now they had a new type of prey, and they were enjoying the hunt. The war turned completely around when humans captured their first intact Zephyrian spaceship. It happened during a battle in Nevada, where Air Force Maintenance Chief Kelly Roberts was leading a mixed group of civilian engineers and military personnel. The alien pilot had made an emergency landing after his ship was damaged by what he thought was primitive human weapons. He expected to be rescued within hours. Instead, he found himself surrounded by humans who were very interested in his technology. Kelly Roberts had spent 20 years keeping human aircraft flying under impossible conditions. Now she was looking at alien technology that was centuries ahead of anything Earth had ever built. But she wasn't intimidated. She was excited. Working with software developer Alex Chen and electronics expert Maria Santos, she set up a makeshift laboratory in an abandoned warehouse outside Las Vegas. Within 3 days, they had figured out how the alien communication systems worked. Within a week, they were intercepting every message the Zephyrians sent to each other. But more importantly, they began to understand how the alien empire actually functioned. What they discovered was shocking in its simplicity. They're just bureaucrats. With advanced technology, Kelly explained during a worldwide resistance briefing. Their entire military is based on following rigid procedures and using overwhelming force. When their standard tactics fail, they literally don't know what to do next. This revelation spread through the human resistance networks faster than any previous intelligence. Suddenly, every fighter on Earth understood that they weren't facing invincible alien warriors. They were fighting glorified office workers who had never encountered an enemy that could think creatively or adapt quickly to changing situations. Human forces immediately began developing new tactics designed specifically to exploit these weaknesses. Farm equipment operator Diane Foster led a team that used agricultural machinery in ways that confused alien sensors. Tractors and combines created massive dust clouds that made it impossible for Zephyrian targeting systems to lock onto human fighters. Crop dusters were modified to spray chemicals that interfered with alien breathing apparatus. Marine veteran Luis Rodriguez developed urban warfare techniques that were specifically designed to trigger alien confusion responses. His fighters would appear to retreat in panic and then disappear into buildings that had been rigged with traps. When the aliens followed expecting an easy victory, they found themselves caught in kill zones where humans had every advantage. The psychological warfare was even more effective than the physical attacks. Humans had learned that Zephyrians were easily confused by unpredictable behavior, so they began acting as unpredictably as possible. They would sing songs during battles. They would offer to trade alien prisoners for pizza. They would paint funny messages on their weapons that translation software couldn't handle properly. Commander Vextal was reading casualty reports that looked like something from a nightmare. His forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to treat warfare as both a deadly serious business and an entertaining game. Human fighters would strike with overwhelming violence and then completely disappear. They would offer truces that turned into elaborate traps. They would surrender positions that had been rigged with explosives. The worst part was that the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Intercepted communications revealed fighters joking and laughing even during the most intense combat. They gave their weapons names and painted pictures on their vehicles. They composed songs about killing aliens and broadcast them on frequencies they knew the Zephyrians were monitoring. Dr. Kethra presented her final analysis to the command staff with hands that trembled from exhaustion and fear. Commander, these creatures are not like anything we have ever encountered. They appear to view warfare as both science and art. They are applying creativity to violence in ways that hurt to contemplate. The holographic display showed examples of human tactical innovations. Teenagers who had turned video game skills into real battlefield tactics. Grandmothers who used gardening knowledge to create biological weapons. Mechanics who had modified civilian vehicles into mobile weapons platforms that outperformed military equipment. They are learning our technology faster than we developed it, Dr. Kethra continued. They have improved our communication systems, made our weapons more efficient, and created defensive measures we never considered. They are not just adapting to our tactics. They are surpassing them. This was proving true across every battlefield. Human engineers were reverse engineering captured alien technology and making it better. Scientists were analyzing alien weapons and building improved versions using Earth materials. Computer programmers were hacking into Zephyrian systems and turning alien equipment against its creators. The resistance networks had evolved into something that resembled a global military force but operated unlike any army in galactic history. There was no single commander and no central headquarters. Instead, millions of independent cells coordinated their actions through quantum-encrypted communications that the aliens couldn't break. Danny Walsh had become the unofficial leader of Earth's defense, not through any formal appointment, but because people trusted his judgment and followed his example. His broadcasts reached resistance fighters on every continent, and his tactical innovations were being implemented by forces he had never met. The message he sent to alien forces was broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. This is General Danny Walsh speaking for the United Earth Resistance. We want the Zephyrian Empire to understand something very important. You came here thinking we were prey. You were wrong. We are the apex predators of this galaxy, and you have made the mistake of waking us up. The transmission showed scenes from around the globe. Alien ships burning in city streets. Zephyrian positions overrun by human forces who fought with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Captured alien technology being improved and turned against its creators. Human spacecraft built from reverse-engineered alien components patrolling Earth's atmosphere. You have 72 hours to leave our solar system. Danny continued calmly. If you refuse, we will show you why humanity conquered an entire planet before we ever learned to fly between the stars. The evacuation of Earth began within 24 hours of Danny Walsh's ultimatum. Commander Vextal stood alone in his personal quarters, staring at tactical reports that read like horror stories. In just 3 weeks, his overwhelming invasion, force had been reduced to a desperate retreat. The humans had not just defeated them, they had done it while learning and improving alien technology faster than Zephyrian scientists could develop it. The commander's hands shook as he reviewed the final casualty numbers. 60% of his ground forces were dead or missing. Half of his fleet was damaged beyond repair. The humans had captured enough Zephyrian technology to build their own spaceships and were already patrolling their solar system with vessels that incorporated the best of both human and alien engineering. Dr. Kethra entered his quarters carrying her final report. Her usually composed demeanor had been shattered by what she had learned about human capabilities. The holographic display she activated showed military history that made the Zephyrian conquest of 17 worlds look like children playing with toys. "Commander, you must see this," she said with a voice that barely controlled her terror. "We analyzed human military history in detail. In their last global conflict, they fought simultaneously on 6 continents, developed nuclear weapons, broke codes that were supposed to be unbreakable, and coordinated millions of fighters using primitive technology. That was only 80 years ago, with a fraction of their current population and much weaker technology. The display showed human armies, crossing oceans to fight on foreign continents, logistics networks that supplied millions of soldiers across thousands of miles, industrial capacity that produced countless aircraft and weapons while under constant attack from enemies who were trying to destroy their factories. They fought that war with bolt-action rifles and propeller-driven aircraft, Dr. Kethra continued. We attacked them with energy weapons and faster-than-light ships, and they still defeated us. They are not just apex predators, Commander. They are apex predators who have spent centuries learning to fight other apex predators. The worst part was what the humans had accomplished during the invasion itself. In 3 weeks, they had gone from a barely spacefaring civilization to a force that could threaten the most advanced empire in the galaxy. They had reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology, improved it, and mass-produced it using manufacturing techniques that were somehow more efficient than anything the aliens had developed. Kelly. Roberts and her team of human engineers had not just copied alien designs, they had made them better. Human spaceships built from captured Zephyrian technology were faster, more maneuverable, and more heavily armed than the originals. Human weapons were more accurate and more destructive. Human communication systems were more secure and more reliable. The final transmission from Earth came as the last Zephyrian ships prepared to leave the solar system. It was broadcast on all frequencies in perfect Zephyrian language using translation technology that was superior to what the aliens themselves used. The image that appeared on every screen in the fleet was of Danny Walsh, standing in what was clearly a command center built from captured alien equipment. To the Zephyrian Empire and any other species who might be listening to this message, Danny said calmly, Earth is now under human protection. We have taken your technology and made it better. We have studied your military tactics and developed counters to them. We have earned our place among the stars not as conquerors, but as defenders of those who cannot defend themselves. The image shifted to show human spacecraft patrolling the edges of the solar system. These were clearly built using alien technology, but they moved and fought in ways that no Zephyrian engineer had ever imagined. They were works of art, as much as they were weapons of war. But let this serve as a warning to anyone who might mistake our peaceful intentions for weakness, Danny continued. We are humanity. We are kind to those who show us kindness. We are terrible to those who threaten our homes. We have been sleeping for thousands of years while we learn to walk among the stars. But if you wake us again, you will discover what apex predators can truly accomplish when they stop pretending to be civilized. Behind Danny stood representatives of the human resistance, engineers and farmers and teachers and mechanics who had turned themselves into the most effective fighting force the galaxy had ever seen. They had taken the best of what the aliens offered and made it uniquely human. They had proven that creativity and adaptability were more powerful than any advanced technology. The broadcast continued with a detailed explanation of human capabilities that was clearly intended for any alien species who might be considering future attacks on Earth. Humans had not just repelled the invasion. They had learned everything the Zephyrians knew about space travel warfare and technology. They had improved on all of it and were now ready to take their place as a major power in galactic politics. As the Zephyrian fleet limped back toward their home territory, Commander Vextal composed his final report. It was the shortest and most important message he had ever sent to the Imperial Council. 3 simple words that would reshape how every species in the galaxy thought about the small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Avoid human space. The age of human expansion had begun. Within months, human ships were exploring nearby star systems, not as conquerors, but as neighbors offering trade and protection to species who had lived in fear of the Zephyrian Empire. The humans brought with them technology that was somehow both more advanced and more reliable than anything the galaxy had seen before. But more importantly, they brought something that had been missing from galactic civilization for centuries. They brought hope. Hope that bullies like the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. Hope that small worlds could stand up to vast empires. Hope that intelligence and creativity were more powerful than brute force and overwhelming numbers. The galaxy would never be the same, because humanity was awake now and they were ready to show the universe what apex predators could accomplish when they worked together.